Our next guest is Gecko Robotics co-founder and CEO, Jake Loosararian. Welcome, Jake. All right. Jake, for those who might not be familiar with your robots, I'm going to start by saying what I think you do, and you can correct me if I get anything wrong. So, Gecko makes these very cool robots. They crawl up walls, through pipes, anywhere you might want a robot to go, and they climb over power plants, ships, our aging infrastructure as a country. They grab data that feeds into software, which tells us when that ship or that power plant will need maintenance, whether it needs immediate maintenance, the problems that might be coming down the pike. Did I do a decent job?
Yeah, that's really great. It's all about collecting the information that powers these AI models.
All right, so you mentioned AI. Obviously, you started this company in your dorm room some 12 years ago, before AI had sort of exploded into public consciousness, at least. What does AI unlock for you? What is the AI piece of the puzzle for Gecko?
Yeah, well, a little bit about Gecko. We focus on energy, manufacturing, defense applications in particular, but basically it's all about understanding and diagnosing the health of the world's most critical pieces of infrastructure. Now, all that information and data set is used to then derive insights around how do you actually make a customer's end product, whether it's a barrel per day or it's getting ships out of dry dock faster or manufacturing steel at a lower price point and higher production. It's all about using information and data that never existed before to be able to drive different sorts of decisions using software, especially software enabled by artificial intelligence models, to do so. Now, this data never existed before. And I think this is like the dirty little secret about AI. And whenever I have conversations in the Congress Center, it's all about, my goodness, like the AI investments just aren't yielding. And I think it's like, well, yeah, that's, the data that's trained on most of the models that we see is trained on the internet. Well, that data doesn't exist in this built world. And so we've got to go out and grab it.
You've been pretty outspoken on that topic. We're going to come back to it. But first, I want to ask you, so we just had Chris Lehane from OpenAI. They make an amazing product. I use it all the time. But every once in a while, I type into ChatGPT, and it tells me that Donald Trump is not president of the United States. It does make basic errors from time to time. Your AI, if you are using it to tell us...
Did it say he's like president of the world or something?
Well, yeah, maybe it's seeing the future. But I think for you, it's your systems have to be basically zero fail, right? If your robot crawls around a ship, says, yeah, this thing looks pretty seaworthy, and then it sinks a week later, that's a big problem for you. How do you, you say you're a software company. How do you create software that doesn't have those little blips that can cause pretty big problems?
Yeah, I mean the things that we're out there collecting are things that, like, if they go wrong, people die. You have industries come to a halt. And I think like what's been fascinating in digging in is, like, as a roboticist, most of the robots that you see, whether they're the humanoids, whether they're like flying around, like you typically, or manufacturing facilities, you typically don't see robots out there in these like dirty environments collecting this information and data set. At such high fidelity. I mean, we're collecting millions of times more information than anyone ever knew about a bridge or a refinery asset or a power plant or something on how healthy a ship is. And the fact of the matter is, when you think about, okay, like that makes sense, that's great, it's doing that. But the reality is, all that information data was collected by humans before us. And all that, all the information that's feeding into models, right, that these companies are using to try and drive efficiency of refining petroleum or refining petrochemicals, or making steel faster, or doing things on the military side. They're driven by information data that's like quite short in terms of like its shortcomings, and that creates hallucinations. And I think robotics, and in particular the things that we do, is collecting so much redundant information and data set, training that, and using machine learning to process signal from noise, and then you can drive and use models. And so the key is, like, where does all the information go that robots are collecting, and then how do you what kind of applications and agentic tools can you build on top of that? And so we focus 100% on collect as much data and as high fidelity as possible, do that as often as you can, and do it on literally all the most important things that power the economy. That's like the big focus of robotics, and build them in the environment. You just don't see that happening with these, with most companies in the robotics sector, other than like the self-driving on the roads. And so that's where the innovation comes from, is access to the problem. So you can't expect these industries to change if you don't actually get access with robotics. And so the most incredible companies and CEOs in the world totally get that. Those are the ones that we go deep with in terms of our customer base.
All right, so you hinted at this. You have described the AI explosion as the definition of a gold rush. So why do you say that? And for people in the room who might be hunting for gold, where should they be looking if the industry at large looks to you as a gold rush?
Look, I mean, here's the thing. All of there's a reason why there's a bubble with AI, right? Like there's so much efficiency to drive. Now the problem is, how do you access that in the industries that drive all of our GDP? Okay, where AI is going is in the physical realm. Okay, so physical intelligence, we hear a little bit more about this, and it's just like, how do you get robots to interact in the real world, or how do you use robots intelligently to get information and data in the real world? Where AI is going is in the physical realm. It's very important to understand this. And the countries and the companies that get this quickest and fastest are going to be the ones that are being advantaged in terms of the margin, the amount of product, and how safely they're able to do it, environmentally so as well. And so this is what's coming. It's when you can figure out how to extract information and data that derive better sorts of decisions when you're making steel, or you're using it for on the hydrocarbon side. With a company oriented towards my robots and software should be dedicated at creating more of your product and less cost, and doing it safer, extending the useful life of the assets and capex. These are the companies that you see adopting them that you should be thinking about, like, oh, these are the dominant ones of the future. Those are the ones that are going to be leading the way. The ones that don't will become irrelevant, I think, in the next 5 years.
You said the governments that get this will have a big advantage. The U.S. government is a customer of yours, but does the U.S. government get this that you're talking about, that AI is headed to the physical world and they need to get their hands around it?
They're beginning to get it, and I think it's mostly driven by like fear of the huge head start or the huge advantages that China has. And so when you think about, again, like from a country's from a GDP perspective, if you're able to refine petroleum or refine hydrocarbons, cheaper with less labor, and we find more of it at less cost, this is a huge advantage as it relates to your country's GDP and its growth, the long-term potential of that growth as well as the dependencies on the human workforce that's augmented now, and so there's less dependencies on that and scaling up workforce to be able to take on these jobs. So it means that you're going to be advantaged in terms of typically you see like the sorts of like multiples on these these companies look like they should. Well, you're seeing now like a lot of these investments are trying to drive towards energy companies trading at more and more. They're going to be trading more and more like tech companies, I think. And then the U.S., what they're seeing is if the world of AI is going to be heading towards physical robots, manufacturing capacities are completely outmatched in the U.S. Versus China. China's way further along, and so it's driving this innovation both in manufacturing, robotics manufacturing, but also robotics in the real world, for both offensive and defensive purposes.
And since you're mentioning how fast this whole field is evolving, you've been in robotics now for more than a decade. Have there been any along that journey for you? Have there been sort of holy shit moments along the way with where robotics is developing as an industry, or what you're able to do now that you weren't able to do 2 years before, 3 years before?
Yeah, I mean, and Qualcomm's been a big accelerant of that. But I think there's just been a huge focus on this like application of robotics to help to drive the augmentation of this like workforce problem. I mean, we're trying to build a bunch of ships in the U.S., right? Shipbuilding speeds are 230 times slower in the U.S. than they are in China. So okay, you can't out-labor, so you have to out-innovate in terms of trying to accelerate how quickly you're able to build and keep up, not just with military equipment, but with private sector equipment as well. And so to do that, you're seeing a hyper focus on using tools, whether it's you just don't have inspectors and welders, right, in high enough quantities, so you have to augment that with robotics. Now, China has about 60% of the world's industrial robots, currently. Of the world, 60% is in China. And so a huge advantage, again, in terms of, robot AI-first approach. So the U.S. is trying to usurp that with the new technology to speed up evaluations of parts, welding of parts using these like systems. That's what Gecko's very much at the center of right now for building on the defense side. But that's where things are going to, you're going to see a lot more run towards that in terms of manufacturing speed to augment the workforce. And you're also going to see that too with companies that are trying to make, whether it's barrels or it's kilowatts or whatever, or steel or whatever it is, to augment workforce as well using robotics, again, to drive down the cost of making stuff, thus improving your stock price. So that's where things are going, and the ones that move the quickest there are going to be the most advantage. And you're seeing a lot of it actually from the east in China.
So those are industrial robots for the most part. Are based on what you know about the industry, would you expect all of us to be interacting more with robots in our personal lives? Are we going to have humanoid robots folding our laundry 5 years, 10 years from now? Where do you see? Well, let's just talk about humanoids in particular. Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I think my take on humanoids and robots as a whole is robots have the real problem with robots is employing robots, actually. So that's going to be like that's actually the problem that I'm focused on. How do you actually employ robots to justify the ROI? So I'm not going to pay, maybe you will pay $40,000 for Optimus to have a teleoperated robot folding your laundry, you're walking around while you're maybe in the shower or something like that. Again, teleoperated. There's going to be a lot of teleoperations. It's not all going to be autonomous. It won't be autonomous. And so, like, that's not something I'm probably going to pay for. But if you can figure out how to make robots really valuable in a setting where you're making really expensive products or kilowatts or, again, like metal or whatever these really expensive GDP driving companies are, my goodness, like, I'll pay a bunch of money for that, but it has to work inside of an ecosystem and a system that can take information and data that's actually freaking valuable and then turn it into something that's insightful that can drive a competitive advantage or a labor augmentation or something like that. How do you take like a human that's like working at Home Depot and turn them into someone who's like very helpful and productive within like 2 or 3 months, opposed to spending 10,000 hours getting good at something? These are the sorts of things that are going to be the big drivers. And but like, and this is where I'm focused on, like, how do you make robots? How do you employ robots? Like, I think that's going to be the big question. Just like, how do you employ AI models is kind of a question right now from a lot of CEOs I talk to.
All right. So the question of how you employ robots. Your robots, are nice robots. They are they're performing very helpful functions. They're making sure things that shouldn't explode don't explode, etc. There are people who are working at the intersection of AI and robotics who are not just making, who maybe have different intentions for robots. I cover national security, so you maybe could have envisioned that I might go here. But how concerned are you? How concerned should people be about when are the killer robots coming? I guess is my question.
Yeah, Terminators. Yeah, this is great. I love these are the kind of questions, and I think it's important to note too, like I believe that I'm going to be the biggest purchaser of humanoid robots. I just want to make sure that's like clear. I believe in the technology, but I believe in.
And why humanoid in particular? Why do we have to recreate us to make them efficient?
I think it's because of the shortages that you're seeing around the world as it relates to employment, as it's labor, whether it's like decreasing populations or it's increasing amount of supply or demand, whether it's energy demand or it's metal demand or and you're seeing geopolitically you want to onshore more and more things. Well, you don't always have the population or the desire of that population to actually get into those jobs, and so you have to figure out like, well, okay, well, I can't be dependent on whether it's the U.S. anymore or China anymore, or Russia anymore, whatever it is. You have to be self-dependent. And so you have to onshore. Well, there's a bunch of labor problems to solve for in that case, and then you want to also do it like most efficiently and effectively and most competitively. And so how do you do that without having to carry as much overhead? These are the kinds of things going to drive the adoption and where the ROI is going to come from. But again, it's got to all feed into a central source of truth that you can actually take actions on. But from a Terminator standpoint, fun topic. I love Terminator conversations. I think this is the approach that I'm trying to take first and foremost is that is the robots should be fully dedicated towards going in and making jobs safer, reducing hazardous work hours. We have in our milestones to reduce hazardous work hours by about 20% with some of our oil and gas contracts. It's to prevent catastrophic failures from just going off and happening. We've been able to save some of the biggest refineries in the U.S. from having some of the largest explosions and killing people. I started the company because someone died trying to gather data at heights, about preventing catastrophes. It's about extending the useful life. These are the kind of things that robots should be focused on. Terminators will begin to occur, once there's like a rise of conflict. So what I mean by that is you don't get these like jumps in innovation unless there's like a large motivation to like create tools to give you advantages. And so the closer World War III or the closer hot conflict becomes, whether it's in Taiwan or these are the things that are going to drive Terminators. And then you have to ask the question, okay, if I enter into like this Terminator world, is there any coming back from this? Like, who's got the advantage? Who can manufacture the Terminators? Again, these are the kinds of questions that governments are talking about right now, and it's very, it's very. It's very timely because of the rising tensions around the world. But this is again where it's like you got to solve for manufacturing, you got to solve for access to the problems, you got to solve for your supply chains, the actuators, the connectors, all these kinds of things, the manufacturing at scale. And again, this is you got to look. If you're a U.S. or you're Germany or whoever you are, am I ready to be able to play this game? And a lot of countries right now, the U.S. being one of them, by the way, is saying we're not ready and we have to figure this out damn fast. And so this is why the year of the robot, or like the couple of years, the next couple of years are going to be dominated. I mean, I talk about how energy companies are they're hiring AI officers now. They're going to hire robotics officers in the next year or two. It's just because this is where it's all going, guys. It's the manifestation of AI is in the physical realm.
Since I don't want to end on Terminators, I'll bring it back to a softer topic perhaps. So we're here in Davos, but your company is based in Pittsburgh. You're a tech unicorn. You're based in Pittsburgh. You're not out in the Valley. Give me a quick rundown, pros, cons. Are you always going to be in Pittsburgh? How do you feel about being a big tech CEO here at Davos, but representing the Steel City?
Oh man, I love this question. Thank you for it. Pittsburgh. I started this company an hour north of Pittsburgh because it got access to a problem that no one else could see, and that was how power and how energy was decaying, and there was no technology. No Silicon Valley company was running to the rescue. They were all focused on building the applications that are going after the dopamine hits, and there's when you have like an echo chamber, you don't see like beyond your little area. And so what's so exciting, and my talk is the build up towards a more important talk, which is coming up next with Dina. Dina is here. She's a huge advocate for Pittsburgh. They had a huge conference in Pittsburgh where all these energy executives and technology executives came. What I'm seeing from Pittsburgh is this look. I grew up in this 70% of steel came from Pittsburgh. More millionaires were in Pittsburgh in 1930 than there were in New York. You're seeing these companies that. Companies were the backbone of infrastructure. What's beginning to happen is that access to the problem sets that Gecko has and the access to the energy companies around Pittsburgh are the breeding ground for such incredible innovation that's happening right now. And so, and you're seeing this rush as well with data centers to this area. And my goodness, there's no better place to build such innovative technology that Silicon Valley doesn't get to see and have access to than right in the heartland of the country of the United States, because we get to see these problems. That's why I love working in the UAE, for example, or love working in some of these places internationally. Peru, there's another one. But they have give us access to the problems, and they are aggressive in their approach to solving and using technology to give them the competitive advantage. And that sort of competitiveness, that's what Dina and that's what Pittsburgh represents, is this this gritty competitiveness that's trying to build technology that's going to lead the frontier, in transforming these companies that have been around for quite a long time that we rely on every single day.
Jake, you are a pro. You've already set up the next segment. I thought that was my job. Thank you very much. This is
the real segment. All right. Yeah.
Thank you very much.